Says, just as the citizens of Tallahassee or anyone should visit the city today can hardly believe that such natural features existed a century and more ago, these first observers would have found it impossible to believe that their cultural descendants would allow the area that might as well be taken for the land of the fairies to become the scene of desecration it appears today. I got in the mail records from the daughter of Eleanor Ketchum, the chairwoman of the Sesquicentennial Committee. And keep in mind, Kay Ketchum, her daughter, she's been gone from Tallahassee since 1967. Kind of a crazy series of events. So I went to Buck Lake Elementary School when I was little, and I was looking up some of the teachers that I used to go to school with. One of the teachers that really made an impact on me was Miss Donna Franks. And so I was looking her up on Facebook, and then I saw this post by Kay Ketchum. And it caught my attention because it actually had Donna Franks, my teacher, listed on there as a person who wrote the letter. This crazy coincidence wherein Donna Franks seemed to be very dedicated to the exact same thing I am, which is rebuilding Cascades Park. And so I click on this letter, and it basically says, it's to, of course, Donald Tucker. It's from 1969, and it basically lays out that the Florida Engineering Society has designed a master plan which would include the restoration of the original watercourse and Cascades, which were part of that area and our city in the 1800s. And so they were basically trying to get ready for the Sesquicentennial, which was in 1974, the 150-year anniversary of the founding of Tallahassee. And so one of the big plans that they had put together for the Sesquicentennial was the complete kind of renewal of Cascades Park. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to restore the original waterfall feature, and they wanted to restore the original sinkhole feature. Now, this, of course, was a big dilemma because they had filled in the sinkhole in World War II, and so they needed state resources to do it. Well, enter in this picture Secretary of State Richard Stone. When Richard Stone went to the U.S. Senate in 1971, all the interest that he had generated in the restoration of the park at the time had really dissipated. And because he was in Washington, nobody really cared anymore about restoring Cascades, which that is just the most Tallahassee story for you. So here is the actual capital improvement plan project produced by the Women's Club of Tallahassee. Here is a document at the top. You see, this is more of like a political document. It says, restore the Cascades, and it makes the case for why they should be restored. So here's a quote from John Lee Williams. John Lee Williams was one of the two men who met in the middle under the waterfall when Tallahassee was first founded. This is a quote from 1824. It's describing the Cascades. So it says, at length the party arrived in the morning of the 9th of the month, by the way of a gentle rise upon the summit of a bold commanding eminence, at whose eastern and southern base a beautiful rivulet meandered its course through a rich hammock. Our party was not long in selecting a camping ground, and pitched their tent about midway of the southern slope. Might well be taken for the land of the fairies. To the southward and westward, the country opened to their view like a magnificent park, gently undulated and studded with the basins of limpid water. At their feet a crystal fountain, gushing from the declivity of the hill. To the eastward, the view was more confined by the thick foliage of undergrowth, which served to screen the view, though not the sound, of a beautiful cascade, which was formed by the rivulet above described, falling over a ledge of rocks into a deep glen, which forms almost a circle of about 70 yards in diameter and disappears at the bottom of the same ledge of rocks very near to the cascade. When the large pond east of Leon County High School was filled in during the 1930s, the rivulet deteriorated to its present status of a drainage ditch. The deep chasm that formed the Cascades, and which ran from about where the public market is located to the Centennial Field, had been filled in by this time. As for the basins of limpid water, Their beauty may have led to their own downfall. The clear, deep waters, as well as the waters of the Cascades, had a special appeal for bathers, but after a number of drownings, some of which were particularly tragic and saddened the entire community, the area became a place to be dreaded, so no voice was raised in protest when the city and railroad company conspired to fill in what had become to be called the bottomless pit. With the city using it as a dump ground and the railroad dumping it into all manner of materials, it took years to stop the flow of waters to the underground, and incidentally to destroy the remaining beauty of the area. So I like this. This is a 1971 memo by the Department of Natural Resources, and it says, enclosed is a revised cost estimate for the Cascades Park based on our recent conversations. And so the cost estimate that they have for Cascades Park was $399,000. For some context, I believe we spent around $40 million for Cascades in 2012. Which, look, I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying that was a bargain back then for Cascades Park. Some kind of notes from somebody, I'm not really familiar who this is. It says Jocelyn Rovetta, but Jocelyn's a hell of a writer. She says in here, the Cascades themselves are not that important, but what happened to them is. The Cascades were a series of rippling, rushing streams through a wooded ravine. The ripples and cascades were climaxed by a beautiful 16-foot waterfall over a limestone ledge into a beautiful pool or sink. The Cascades themselves are long gone, and the idea of going back to 1830 is impossible and undesirable. But the idea that man is so slovenly and so thoughtless that he will destroy the very beauty that attracted him is frightening. If man is incapable of using land without destroying all traces of its natural beauty, then our future is very bleak. If no one brings any suggestions to the men in charge, then they will of course do the most immediate and most convenient thing that comes to their minds, probably paving for parking. So when the state begins to clear away the unsightly city buildings that will soon be abandoned, we must encourage them to make constructive use of the area and return it to some of its former beauty. And here's the map. Here's the map of Cascades as it was back then in 1971. And probably the most special thing in this whole packet, y'all, and I want to thank Kay Ketchum again. This is really special. Thank you. This is a print, and it's from the Sesquicentennial. It says, the Florida Capitol Sesquicentennial, Cascades Park, groundbreaking, March 4th, 1974. So here you see Prime Meridian here, and then the Cascades over here. This is really special. This is really beautiful. This is actually a print. Kay told me she's also included a copy of The Cascades by Clarabelle Jett, who she says was a fairly well-known Tallahassee artist and a good friend of her mother's. She says that her original frame painting hung in Stone's office, and when he left for Washington to serve as senator, he gave the painting to her mother. This is really special. Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it, Kay. I know that future generations of people will care about this just as much as your mother did, Kay. So thank you again. Let's restore the Cascades.